My name is Adrian, and I was, until recently, a composer. Not a famous one, but respected in certain circles. My gift, my defining trait, was my perfect pitch. I could identify any note, any frequency, with absolute precision. Sound was my world, and I was its master. The silence, for me, was never truly silent. I could hear the 60-cycle hum of the electricity in the walls, the faint high-frequency whine of a television on standby. My entire life was a symphony of vibrations. To escape it, to find a true perfect silence where I could finally compose my magnum opus. I spent nearly my entire inheritance on an apartment in Vienna's most peculiar building, the Echo Tower. It wasn't a residence in the traditional sense. It was a converted anechoic research facility, a building designed to be the quietest place on earth. The walls were a foot thick, layered with sound-dampening foam and lead. The windows were triple-paned acoustic glass that looked out onto a silent, private courtyard. It was a composer's dream, a perfect sterile void where the only sounds would be the ones I created. My girlfriend Lena thought it was clinical and soulless. To me it was paradise. The first week was the most productive of my life. The silence was absolute. It was so profound that at first it was disorienting. I could hear the blood rushing in my own ears, the soft click of my own blinking eyelids. But once I adapted, the music poured out of me. The symphony I had been struggling with for years began to take shape on the pages, uninhibited by the distracting noise of the outside world. I was creating something pure, something perfect. The problem began on the 8th day. It started as a single, faint, and utterly impossible note. I was sitting at my piano working on a complex chord progression when I heard it. It was a high-frequency tone, a pure sine wave hovering just at the edge of my hearing. It was a beef, but not. It was slightly sharp. Not sharp enough to be a binatural, but just off a microtone, a frequency that had no place in Western music. My perfect pitch screamed in protest. It was the auditory equivalent of a crooked picture frame on a perfectly clean wall. I spent the rest of the day in a state of clinical obsession. I assumed it was tinnitus, an artifact of my own hearing, but it was too stable, too consistent. It didn't waver. I then assumed it was the building. I used my sensitive spectrum analyzer, a device that could map every frequency in a room, and swept my apartment. Nothing. The machine registered only perfect, beautiful silence. Yet I could still hear it. The note was not in the room. It was in my head, but it wasn't a hallucination. It felt external. Lena came over that evening. I asked her casually if she could hear a faint, high-pitched sound. She tilted her head, listened intently, and shook her head with a smile. I don't hear anything, Adrian. Just you. This place is honestly a little creepy. It's too quiet. She couldn't hear it. Her imperfect, normal human ears were deaf to its wrongness. My gift was making me the sole audience for this auditory poison. Over the next few weeks, my work on the symphony ground to a halt. The single, discordant note was no longer alone. It was joined by others. A low, guttural G-sharp that was slightly flat, an E that wavered between two impossibly close frequencies. Soon it wasn't just a collection of wrong notes. It was a melody, a slow, meandering, and deeply unsettling tune. It had a structure, a repeating pattern, but it followed no rules of harmony or theory that I knew. It was like listening to the music of a completely alien species. My life became a singular obsession to find the source of the sound. I tore my apartment apart, convinced there was a hidden transmitter. I spent thousands on new acoustic paneling, trying to create an even deeper silence, but the melody only seemed to get clearer in the absence of other sounds. Lena grew increasingly worried. She found me one afternoon, sitting in the middle of the floor, my head in my hands, humming the dissonant tune under my breath. "You need a break, Adrian," she said, her voice laced with a concern that was beginning to curdle into fear. "You look terrible. You're not sleeping. This symphony is killing you." "It's not the symphony," I tried to explain, my voice cracking with desperation. "It's the other one, the wrong one. Can't you hear it?" I grabbed her, pulling her close, begging her to listen. She just looked at me with pitying eyes, and I saw the thought form on her face. He's losing his mind. She was the first person to draw that conclusion. She would not be the last. If I couldn't silence the sound, I decided I had to understand it. I had to capture it. I abandoned my symphony and turned my state-of-the-art recording studio into a laboratory. I used frequency generators and complex audio software, spending days trying to replicate the first note, that slightly sharp B-flat. When I finally matched it, the sound that came from my speakers was physically uncomfortable. It created a strange, vibrating pressure in the room, making my teeth ache and my stomach churn. I built on it, note by agonizing note, using my perfect pitch to transcribe the phantom melody that lived in my head. The music I created was a nightmare. It was a mathematical representation of anxiety, a structured, weaponized form of wrongness. I invited Lena over, determined to make her understand, to prove I wasn't crazy. "I've recorded it," I told her, my eyes wild with a mixture of terror and triumph. "I've captured the sound." I played the piece for her. It was only 30 seconds long. She listened, her brow furrowed in concentration. Then her face went pale. She stumbled back, covering her ears. "Adrian, turn it off," she cried, her voice filled with genuine pain. "What is that? It's horrible. It sounds like screaming, but in musical form." I stopped the recording. "You heard it?" I asked, a wave of vindication washing over me. "Of course I heard it," she said, breathing heavily. "How could you create something so ugly, so full of pain?" And that's when I understood. She hadn't heard the phantom sound. She had only heard my perfect, terrible recreation of it. She didn't see it as proof. She saw it as a symptom. She believed the ugly music was coming from me, a product of my own unraveling mind. She left that night. I didn't see her again. Her departure was the final catalyst. The world no longer understood me. The music, the real music, was the only thing that did. My obsession transformed into a deranged form of artistic reverence. I was no longer a victim of the sound. I was its chosen interpreter. I was the only one in the world gifted enough to hear this new, secret music, this symphony from the cracks between realities. I stopped trying to sleep. I stopped eating. I lived on coffee and the dissonant melody. I filled dozens of notebooks with a new form of musical notation, a language of microtones and impossible rhythms. I was composing my true magnum opus, not the boring, traditional symphony I had started, but a transcription of the song that had chosen me. I called it the Dissonance. After 2 months of feverish non-stop work, it was complete, a 12-minute piece for a full digital orchestra. It was my life's work, the culmination of my gift and my madness. I had to share it. I had to make them see. I sent 2 invitations, one to Lena and one to my producer, a man named Marcus. I told them it was the premiere of my new symphony, and it was the most important work of my life. I think they only came out of a sense of morbid curiosity to see the final state of the mad composer. They arrived to find the apartment transformed. Wires snaked across the floor, connecting dozens of speakers, all angled towards a single chair. In the center of the room, the walls were covered in my frantic scribbled sheet music. I was gaunt, my eyes burning with the fire of a zealot, but I was clean, dressed in a black suit, ready for the performance. "Thank you for coming," I said, my voice a dry rasp. "Please sit. You are about to be the first to hear the future of music." They sat, their faces a mixture of pity and fear. I stood at my console, took a deep breath and pressed play. The sound that filled the acoustically perfect room was not of this world. It was a slow, creeping symphony of dread. The microtonal frequencies I had so perfectly captured created a physical sensation of illness. The impossible rhythms felt like a direct assault on the brain's ability to process patterns. The music was a living thing, a sonic parasite that burrowed into the listener's mind, causing disorientation, nausea, and a profound, existential terror. Marcus went pale and began to sweat. Lena started to cry, not from sadness, but from a raw neurological pain. She tried to stand, but the sound was disorienting, her sense of balance gone. And me. I stood in the center of the room, my arms outstretched, my eyes closed. I was awash in the glorious, perfect wrongness. Every note that had haunted me, every frequency that had tormented me, was now outside of me, made real, made magnificent. For the first time, the cacophony in my head was in perfect harmony with the world around me. I could finally hear everything clearly. The last thing I remember is the look on Lena's face as she crawled towards the door, her expression one of utter terror. But as she looked at me, her terror was mixed with something else, horrified realization. She finally understood. The ugly music, the sound of pain, wasn't just my creation. It was me. I don't know what happened after that. I'm told the police found me 3 days later. Marcus was in a catatonic state in the hallway. Lena had escaped, but was suffering from severe neurological trauma. They said when they entered the apartment, the terrible music was still playing on a loop, but it wasn't coming from the speakers. The speakers had all been blown, their cones shredded. The sound, they said, was coming from me. I was just standing in the middle of the room, my mouth slightly open, my body vibrating, the impossible, dissonant melody of my madness emanating from the core of my very being. I had finally silenced the sound in my head by becoming the source of it. And now, I will never know silence again.